What's going on, everyone? I've heard the news. I'm sure most of you have heard the news and seen this stuff slung all over the internet, but Nicolas Cage has come out saying that he much prefers Star Trek to Star Wars. When specifically asked who he would like to play in the Star Wars universe, he's like, nah, dog, I want to play someone in Star Trek, if anything. That, of course, has led to rampant speculation that, oh my god, Nicolas Cage is going to be in Star Trek. Well, I don't believe that's actually in the cards right now. I've decided to throw my hat in the ring here and go over a few choices on who he might actually play from a pre-established, previously appearing character in Star Trek. And I'm going to do this episode here just on the original series with a slight inclusion of the original series movies towards the end, because I believe that there are quite a few choices in just this series that he could play. Again, I'm doing actually established characters. I'm not doing a Klingon, a Romulan, a brand new character, just a character that's already been set up that he could slot into and play a new interpretation. Primarily, my thoughts here are either in a Kelvin film, and I'm only saying that for two reasons. One, he's such a big name that I don't believe he would just be a guest spot in a TV show, but also because one of the characters I'm picking is already cast in the current version of the new Trek Discovery type universe, and I don't want to oust that person just to slot Nicolas Cage in. Because I couldn't come up with a definitive ranking, I'm just going to put these people in order as they appeared in air date. So number 1 doesn't necessarily mean it's my favorite pick. Number 7 doesn't necessarily mean it's my least favorite pick. So cracking right into it, Gary Mitchell. So I skipped over the pilot, both pilots, the Man Trap, Charlie X, although I did consider him playing a version of Charlie X, but I believe he's a little too old, so it would have to be a return of that character. Gary Mitchell has a lot of potential, and once he gained this godlike power to mess with Kirk and to mess with the ship and all of that, he went a little bit unhinged. So I think if we are going to have a return of Gary Mitchell in the series, coming back to life or a reinterpretation, obviously Nicolas Cage could play that very godlike, unhinged personality quite well. Whether or not they would throw in the origin story or just bring him back as a resurrected version of himself, I'm not sure. Since this is all fan casting, I'm going to say they just bring him back from the dead, and he's more mentally unstable than ever. So following on from Gary Mitchell, number 2, we have Harry Mudd. And this is the actual reason I decided to throw the Kelvin universe in there, because Rainn Wilson has already taken on this role in Discovery and the short treks. He has yet to be seen in any of the other spin-off media, such as Strange New Worlds. I'm kind of thinking he may pop up there at some point, so I don't want to just throw him away, despite the fact that a lot of people had some divided feelings on him. I believe that if he's given the right part to play as Harry Mudd, a little less vindictive and a little less dark, like those first couple of seasons of Discovery were, he could play a more jovial and a more interesting version of Harry Mudd, so I don't want to see Rainn Wilson get cast out. If they were to do a Kelvin universe, Nicolas Cage could play that version, a different version of Harry Mudd, similar to how the Kelvin Pike and the Strange New Worlds Pike are vastly different characters, but they're still playing and occupying the same role. Moving along from Harry Mudd, we get to somebody that I actually think would be my number 1 choice, and that is Trelane from the episode The Squire of Gothos. I thought about possibly casting Nicolas Cage as a Q, not a replacement for John Delancey, another version of the Q. However, that gets into Next Generation Plus territory, and I'm only sticking to TOS right now. And we have all sorts of shenanigans currently going on with the Q because of what happened in Picard Season 2. And while that didn't necessarily sit right with me, the fact that the Q are gone, spoilers for that show, I suppose, I don't necessarily think we have the end of that story, even though they tried to play it off like it was a definitive ending. I'm going to go with Trelane because A, he is much more of an untapped quantity. A lot of people speculate he was a child Q, a proto-Q. Heck, maybe he's even a grown-up version of Q's son from Voyager. All of that being said, if we're just sticking with TOS era without any future information, I think Nicolas Cage could play a great version of Trelane, that trickster god that messing with our crew, has omnipotent powers or seemingly omnipotent powers, acting a little crazy, having some interesting thought process. I think he could actually play a more unhinged version of Trelane than we've ever seen. And since he's only appeared in this one episode in Alpha Canon, I know he appears all over the place in video games, comic books, novels, and all those things. I think this could be a great reinterpretation And since we haven't seen him again in any shows since, he could be in the Kelvin universe or in the Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Prodigy, whatever you want to call it universe. The very next person we have on our list, and this one might be somebody that's a little less known to you. This guy is named Lazarus. He's from the 27th episode of the first season, entitled The Alternative Factor. And for whatever reason, when I was growing up in high school, when we were first getting access to the internet and watching videos, StarTrek.com had this whole list where you could watch the original series trailers or the previews for upcoming episodes. And I would watch this one over and over again for the sheer lunacy. Obviously, the episode itself is kind of crazy. The behind the scenes situations going on with that, also crazy. The facial hair in this episode, obviously one of the most crazy things you'll see. It never lines up. It never matches from scene to scene, from transition to transition. Sometimes there's 3 whiskers, sometimes there's 4,000. But the crux of this story is this man is playing 2 guys, 2 versions of himself from 2 parallel universes. Our universe and the antimatter universe, where I guess everything is kind of swapped around. And he's trying to stop the evil version of himself by kind of switching back and forth. And it's causing all sorts of shenanigans that are possibly going to destroy our universe. Interesting thought process type of an episode. Very wacky, very zany, very, very over-the-top acting. And I think that would be a fantastic role to see Nicolas Cage play. However, this isn't necessarily a very important Star Trek character, so I'm not really certain how or why they would bring him back. But if they do, this is a role that he would be perfect for. And the next person we have, now we're moving into season 2. Basically, I couldn't come up with an exact person here, so I'm just throwing in almost anyone from the Mirror Universe. It could be a character we've seen before. It could be some new character that's unique to the Mirror Universe. I'm not sure, but based on the way everyone is ramped up to 11 there, everyone is playing everything over the top. I feel like anytime you want to introduce a new character who's not just a mirror version of someone we already know, which doesn't happen all that often. So if they were going to set something in the Mirror Universe and to introduce a very vital character within the Mirror Universe who doesn't necessarily have a counterpart here, or at least not one that we've come to know, I think that would be a great way to put Nicolas Cage in an over-the-top Mirror Universe, thespian, overacting, overdoing everything, chewing the scenery to 11. Now, personally, I believe the Mirror Universe has been a bit overplayed, so if we're going to spend time there, I would want it to be a very vital part of a storyline. So introducing a very high-end, talented, A-list celebrity like Nicolas Cage could add that gravitas to a well-worn trope that I feel is a bit overplayed. Now, moving along, we have this guy, the first on my list of the Deckers from the Doomsday Machine. This one is Commodore Matt Decker. If you remember this episode, it's just a great Star Trek episode to begin with, but this guy overacts way more than we ever saw out of Shatner, at least in my opinion, when he has to play that whole scene of guilt and loss because it's his responsibility for his crew. He beamed them down to a planet that no longer exists. He's stuck on board the ship thinking that he was going to be the one that died and his crew was going to be safe on the planet. It's a reversal. He's the only one left alive. That scene where he breaks down and does, "But not anymore!" I mean, clearly that scene was made for the same man that did the bees from Wicker Man. I mean, it's a straight 1-to-1 replacement. You could just swap him in there so easily. And Commodore Decker, while not really brought up in the new universe of Star Trek shows, is a pretty big character. He is the captain of the sister ship to the Enterprise, the Constellation. Now, I said the first Decker because there is another Decker in Star Trek in the original series adjacent, because this one is now playing into the movie realm, Captain Will Decker. Now, we've only seen this man in one movie. He's kind of the person they retooled Commander William Riker into when they got back to The Next Generation. But I think he also has a good untapped pool of potential. He was a character that didn't necessarily have the most personality. He was more of a blank slate for William Shatner's Captain Kirk to come in and kind of push him out of the way without too much resistance. And most of his character traits, like I said, were added to Riker and, of course, Troy's relationship is similar to the Ilia relationship. So most of what we saw from him was done better in future Star Trek. But what we did get to see is the merging of himself with V'ger into some sort of human-machine hybrid. And of course, there's a whole lot of theories going on about who or what that became. Is it the Borg? Is it something else? I'm not going to go into that speculation, but I could absolutely see, once this merging happened, a very unique type of personality coming out. There's two ways you could go, I guess. You could go a very clinical and logical way. You could have him come out similar to a Vulcan with no emotion, just a lot of intelligence and a lot of logic. Or you could go the other way, where this machine has now gained the ability to feel all of these emotions for the first time, an over-the-top exploration of these emotions. A wacky, a zany, full display of the entire range of human emotions for this character, experiencing them for the first time. So I think that could also be an excellent way to showcase the unique abilities of one Nicolas Cage. But those are just some of my thoughts, specifically from the original series of Star Trek, specifically from characters who we have seen in the past who could be reinterpreted either on the TV shows or in the Kelvin universe, if we were to do such a thing. But what do you think? Are there any examples of characters you think Nicolas Cage should play? Do you hate all of these ideas? Did I miss somebody that's blatantly obvious to you? Leave all those thoughts below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those fancy YouTube things. And until next time, computer and program.